And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to my LinkedIn Live. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into sales conversations and role playing several of those sales conversations with my guest today, Frederick Kermisch. And I'd love it if you wrote in and told us where you're joining us from today. So, in case you didn't know, I'm Julia Poger. I'm a business conference and diplomatic interpreter. I work with Russian and French into English and from English into Russian. And as you most probably already know, I also run a business called Know Your Worth, where I help interpreters and other service professionals to understand how to get your name out and sell your services so you can work at your fees and your conditions. And before we move into our topic today, I'd like to ask you to stick around until the end of the show to find out what we'll be talking about next month. So, to our show. For those of us who joined us last July, you'll recognize Frederick Kermisch. We've known each other for over 15 years, probably 16 years by now. And he's somebody that I've had extended business conversations with, including just this morning. He's bilingual in English and French, has a master's in political science, and over his career has taken numerous courses in psychology, psychometrics, and my favorite, lie detection. Frederick interpreted for nearly 10 years, which is when I met him. And he then shifted his career into financial services. And since 2016, he's been coaching clients selling high added value services. Let's say that again, high added value services or high added value services. There we go. Mostly to private bankers who are seeking to increase their business. Hi, Frederick. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Julia. Thank you for having me.
Hey, anytime, quite frankly, because our sales conversations just expand to fit whatever time we might happen to have. So for those of you who were not here last in July, actually, for our conversation, and I'll put the link to that down in the comments below this. Frederick talked about sales and persuasion techniques for interpreters, which then kind of moved into a games people play kind of a thing and role playing, but we didn't actually role play anything. So what we figured we would do today is we would give you a quick intro to those games people play, and then we would role play some of those conversations. And these are conversations that I've heard from a lot of you over the course of the last couple of months when I asked people to say what would interest them. So we have people here from Canada and Uganda. Oh my God. And hey, Julia, good to see you. That's Julia, my business partner from back in the States from years ago. And Switzerland and all over the place. Great. It's really nice to see you. And Brazil and Germany. And Heather just likes to say lie detection. I love it. And it's true. I mean, it's been a really interesting, very interesting time. So before we get into the actual introduction, I just want to start, and Frederick and I just want to start with a couple of caveats, a couple of basic ground rules from the entire show. So the first thing is that we are going to be a bit in your face. We're going to say things very baldly and very boldly because we don't have hours to dance around things and give you 6 different examples of how you might say something in Japan and Brazil and the US and so on. We're just going to go for it. And basically what we're expecting you to do is to dial it down to the level that your market can handle. Okay. Did you want to say something about that, Fred, while I just put up a couple more hellos?
Yes, absolutely. So the point is, remember, we have a starting point where we usually act, and then we can dial up or dial down. And one of the traits and psychometrics that this is being tough, in other words, being to the point. I've noticed a lot of interpreters are very accommodating. They don't like to rock the boat. So Wherever your starting point is, remember you've got some flexibility to dial up a bit or dial down. We're going to dial up probably quite a few notches above what you're used to doing. So you can find some middle ground where you feel comfortable. The main thing is that you have to feel comfortable doing it. So we'll explain some of the logic behind it. So you realize everything we're saying is purely logical. Not doing it is illogical. That said, with your starting point, move in, sort of increase your comfort zone so it comes more naturally to you. If you try to go all the way, it comes across it can come across as being fake and can come across as being aggressive or domineering. Actually, in psychometrics specifically, this is called overextending. So it's when we exit our comfort zone, we move into a state of mind where we're stressed, and that's where the tough simply becomes seeking conflict. It's easy to do this if we haven't practiced and if we don't understand the logic. So we have to really understand the logic, because just being tough for the sake of being tough is unpleasant and it doesn't work. And what we're interested in is things that work, things that help you get better results in a tangible fashion in real conversations, not just theory, but real conversations. And it's not trying to play some kind of one-upmanship over the person you're talking to, or one-up personship, or whatever the term these days is. The goal is not to so that you're smarter than them and not to prove a point. The goal is to help you get business when you can get business, and avoid misunderstandings derailing conversations. This is key.
Yeah.
Getting better results for you. Not about proving points, not about trying to be smarter or trying to be unpleasant to anyone. Simply avoiding misunderstandings and helping you get more control in the conversations.
These are my reactions because I, of course, as the presenter, don't have any thumbs ups that I can actually click on. The other ground rule for this show is that to avoid any talk of markets and how much various markets charge and pay and so on, we're going to be using the numbers of 1,000 per day as a good rate for interpreting, and your day would be 8 hours long. Though you would probably only spend about 6 hours of that 8-hour day in front of the microphone, okay? You'd have your lunch breaks included, your coffee breaks, and so on and so forth. So 1,000 a day, and just so that you understand, for if we end up having to break things down, that would break down, because my math is so bad, at $125 an hour. I had to have Fred do the math for me, just so that we have that background. And I think that Frederick should probably break down that 1,000 idea. The only thing that I wanted to say is that when you think about it, replace the word 1,000 with the number that you usually would charge as a good rate, okay, for your market, because we all know that people who are in one country do not charge the same as people who are in another country, just even for cost of living reasons, if for no other reason. Okay, and Frederick wanted to break that down for us a bit so that we understand exactly what that fee should involve.
Absolutely. The 2 points of view when we're negotiating. Obviously, there is our point of view. So, how do we see things? And there's also the client's point of view, how they see things. We need to use logic and empathy in both cases so we can learn how to compare and what we're comparing things to. Now, it was a strange realization that I got from the creative Dilbert Scott Adams in one of his books, Loser Think, where he points out that most people don't know how to compare. The only people who know how to compare tend to be engineers and economists, because learning how to compare things is something that most people never, well, learn to do. We just sort of wing it. So, from our point of view, first of all, let's start with 1,000. 1,000 a day can seem like a lot of money, depending what we compare it to, and it can seem like virtually nothing, depending what we compare it to. Now, it's important to remember when we compare things, I like to use the GPS model. Do you know how many satellites you need to be able to establish yourself using a GPS? You can actually use the reply in the chat. The idea being, you got satellites. The GPS will tell you where you are located, and you need a certain minimum of satellites to be able to figure out where you are. So it's the minimum number. I realize the chat might be a little bit slow. Julia, do you have any guess
Yes.
how many satellites you
Oh,
need?
God. Well, no, it involves math. No, but I do know that you've got to probably have a minimum of 3 for triangulation purposes, but I don't know how many
Exactly.
others you would need.
Exactly. A minimum of 3. If you have 1, you're somewhere on the sphere around the satellite. If you have 2, then you're somewhere at the intersection between the 2 spheres. So you could say you got the satellite, you got Earth, so you know that you're at one of the points where they intersect. Exactly, Vladimir. You're absolutely right. 3. And with the third one, you know that you're at the point that intersects between the 3 satellites. Okay. It's the same thing with comparing. So one of the points of comparison could be, well, you could work for free. You could work for free. Absolutely, you could work for free. So anything above free is expensive. That's true. You could compare it to being employed, and then it could seem like a day rate is expensive. But you could also compare it to a proper analysis of what being self-employed, because most of you are self-employed, what self-employed involves. So let's break down this simply from the self-employed point of view. The rule of thumb is if you're self-employed, you need to earn roughly double compared to what you'd be earning if you were employed. And we could, before we were debating, is it double? Is it, 60% more, 80% more? Let's simply say we need to earn roughly double. So if you'd be earning, let's say, $10,000 a month, for some places that's a reasonable salary for people who are, pretty qualified. $10,000 a month being employed, you'd need to earn $20,000 a month being self-employed for it to be the same thing. Remember, being self-employed or being employed, you get sick leave, you get holidays, you get pension, you get other benefits. So this is one of the reasons why you need to earn roughly double when you're self-employed. When you're self-employed, you have to hunt for work, and you're not getting paid for hunting for work. You have to do admin. You're not getting paid for doing the admin. And also, as an
Right.
interpreter, you have to do prep work for conferences. When you get more experienced, it takes a bit less time. But, for, let's say, a entry-level interpreter who doesn't yet have very much experience, it could be roughly a day's preparation. So that being said, the client might think, if you're getting 1,000 a day, that's equivalent to $365,000 a year. That's a lot of money. That point of view is true. However, if we look at it from the interpreter's point of view, if you're working for one day, that's $1,000. But if you have one day of prep work, that's $500 per day. But if you have to be earning double as a freelancer compared to being employed, that's $250 a day. If you're working 8 hours a day, 250 divided by 8 is roughly $20 per hour. I think if I asked you to help me clear out my flat for $20 an hour, most of you would say, I can't work for that kind of money. It's not enough money. When you start realizing that it's equivalent to $20 an hour, it doesn't seem that expensive anymore. Plus, something else to think about, it's not like you're working 365 days per year. Hopefully you have weekends. Hopefully you have some level holidays. If you're working 5 days a week, that's already pretty crazy. But most people aren't working 5 days a week. So if you're working 100 days per year, which is decent, it's not bad, it's not massive, but it's decent, that's equivalent to getting paid $50,000 per year if you're francs or euros or whatever, as it's roughly the same thing now, 50,000 per year if you were employed. So all of a sudden, the attractiveness of the 100,000 versus the 50,000, the attractiveness of the 1,000, it seems pretty reasonable. That's one point of comparison. Another point of comparison is, what do other consultants charge per day? And other consultants in other industries tend to be significantly higher than 1,000 per day. So if you know that
Mhm.
you're working hard for a conference, it takes you a day to prepare, you're there for a day, the level of concentration is just beyond pretty much any, well, most of the other professions have. It's not easy work. We know this. Not all clients know it. But if you think that they're getting paid 2, 3, or 4 times more than you, sometimes for just spouting the regular, management speak or whatever, then compared to them, you're cheap. Compared to the,
Mhm.
what you get paid with alternative job, that's the opportunity cost, you're not expensive. I mean, it's, if you looked at it purely from an economic point of view, it's not a no-brainer to become an interpreter. It's not a very high earning profession compared to many other professions, compared to lawyers. In some places, lawyers will be earning roughly 400-500 an hour per hour, not per day. So compared to
Yep.
a lawyer, it's a complete world of difference. And for lawyers, it makes sense for various reasons. Not saying
But which is
that is
why I get so pissed off at the lawyers who don't want to pay my rate, which is significant, which is like what they charge per hour or per 2 hours, and they're refusing to pay my day rate, especially when they're passing it on to somebody else. But in any case, um,
exactly.
what I'd like them, yeah. So what I'd like to have now, but if we, because so as not to get too much into detail on this, because some of it will come out during our conversations, is to have you give a quick, like no more than 5-minute intro to what the Games People Play is and what we talked about in July for the people who weren't here then.
Absolutely. Games People Play is the title of a book written by a psychologist, Eric Byrne, in the 1960s. Very informative, and he describes automatic games people play unconsciously, automatic ways we behave. The idea is we've got three main ego types, sort of ways of acting. And I'll break them down to you, and then I'll explain how the games work. The first one is the adult one. It's the one we're having now, Julia and myself and you. We're equals as adults. We're all different, but there's no hierarchy. There are many things I know that you don't know. It doesn't make me better than you. It simply means in these segments, I know more than you. And in other segments, you know significantly more than me. So there's no hierarchy. We're just different because we're human. And then we share and we try to help each other out because we're decent human beings. This is the adult phase. Adult mode. Adults are rational and there's space for the emotion. So if I say something that upsets Julia, she can express it to me and I can recognize it. We show empathy and we work things out as adults. Then we've got the child mode. The child mode, so just like children want two things. They want to feel safe and they want to be loved. Why? Because as children, we're dependent on our parents, and especially all of this think that it goes back to when we were cave people and cave children. If we cave children and the parents don't like us, and a saber-toothed tiger is attacking us, and the 12 children to save, well, we're not going to say who do we sacrifice first, but we understand who do we save last. So it's roughly the same thing. If you're not loved, you're not safe. That's one of the reasons why being liked is such a big part of survival, and so many people want to avoid conflict. They don't want to come across the wrong way. They want to please, they want to impress, they want to be loved, just like children are. There are four kinds of children.
Mhm.
The first one is the natural child. The natural child wants to play and have fun and learn. Why? Because as children, when we're learning, we're having fun. It's just a way to motivate us to develop the skill set to become adults and be autonomous. Number one, natural child. Number two, the adapted child. The adapted child has to adapt their behavior in order to stay safe. That's the go and clean your room. Stop asking so many questions. Lower your rates. You're too expensive. Things don't work out. That was terrible. That was catastrophic. When you hear this, possibly you have a cringe reaction. I know that I have an automatic cringe reaction, which is the child thinking, oh my goodness, I did something wrong. I'm about to be punished. I have to change something. Number three, we have the rebel. The rebel is like a teenager. That's the one that goes, one that rejects authority. You want me to clean my room? Have you seen your room? You're a hypocrite. Or you want me to lower my rates? You don't know anything. You don't know how difficult my profession is. Anything like this is a typical teenager reaction, rejecting authority out of resentment and anger and so on. Not saying it's not justified, simply pointing out this is a childish reaction from a psychological point of view. It's not a judgment, just psychologically. The fourth one is one of the ones that's incredibly dangerous for any salesperson, and interpreters are salespeople as they sell their services. It's the little professor. The little professor is the one that believes that if only they can show the adults in the room or the parents in the room or the figures of authority, if only they can show how smart they are, then they will be liked and they'll be safe. We all know at school there was one kid who would always raise the hand to answer first for the teacher, and nobody liked that kid. And the kid thought, that's strange. I'm so smart. People must love me. If they don't love me, it must be because they don't realize how smart I am. Therefore, if I can show how much smarter I am than they are, then they're going to love me. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where things just get worse. This is the, sort of Did you know? Did you know? Let me explain things to you. Let me tell you about interpreting. Let me talk to you. Let me give you numbers. Let me give you things like that. Doing that is a survival strategy of children. It's not helpful. Just imagine if you went to see a dentist and you go, I've got a toothache, and the dentist goes, let me tell you about my drill collection. This is amazing. This is a RJ47. You're like, I don't care. I've got a toothache. Help me. Don't try to impress me. Trying to impress the other person is specifically one of the problems of salespeople and one of the games we get caught in. Then we have, on the other side, the parents. Parents are anyone in a position of authority. So a real parent, a police person, judge, doctor, a quote unquote specialist, but also often a conference organizer or a recruiter or an agency. Anyone who can put themselves above, and remember this, above the people they're talking to. And the two types of parents, you've got the nurturing parent who says, oh, congratulations. That was very good. You are an excellent interpreter. Wow, the way you dealt with that speaker was very impressive. And then, of course, the child thinks, that's great. This person loves me. This figure of authority loves me. I feel safe. And then you have the other one, which is the critical parent. You're too expensive. We can't do that. This is above our budget. That was a catastrophe. Like, how could you do this? Critical parent that usually triggers either the adapted child or the rebel, or sometimes the little professor. So these are the different archetypes. The way games work is when, instead of having an adult to adult conversation, people shift into various modes until they find a parallel balance between the different modes. So that could be, just case in point, in a couple, one person asks the other one, by the way, have you seen the house keys? And which is normally just an adult to adult question. Like, I'm looking for the house keys. Maybe you've seen them. And the other person replies, you should know where they are. I'm not your mother. You keep leaving everything lying around. In other words, critical parent. And if the other person starts getting defensive, then you have a game. You've got a parallel relationship between the different modes. Another one could be, for example, so what are your rates? Which sounds like a critical parent. So usually we're about to spurt out the answer. My rates are this much per day. That's too expensive. Okay, I'll lower the rates. In other words, critical parent, adapted child. I will adapt so that you love me, so that you like me. But anytime we put ourselves in child mode, we're entering autopilot. And the thing is, if we're entering autopilot, we don't understand what's going on. We're losing control, and we're not doing the other person a favor. The other person, we don't know who they are. We don't know what's going on. We don't know why they're contacting us in the first place. And if we just spurt out information, we might be able to help them, but probably not. There might be something else going on. And this is where recognizing the game when you get caught in a game is helpful, and learning a few key sentences to break the game and refocus on them and have more of a diagnostic can be helpful. Now, we know that
One of
Go
the
ahead.
things that we all have to be very, very careful about too, is that when you're saying, if somebody says you're too expensive, this is no good, when you reply, okay, fine, go find somebody else, you are not being an adult. You think you're being an adult, but you're being a rebel child. And this is
Exactly.
something that you have to keep in mind, because I know so many of us think that, oh, okay, well, I'm being the adult here. I'm just going to say, go away. And here I am raising myself above the fray. But what you're actually doing is playing out the rebel child in this case.
It happened to me years ago. There was a recruitment influencer on LinkedIn. I won't mention the name. Who gave a
No.
lot of what she says is basically play the rebel. And I did that in an interview. Like, well, how much are you earning? It's like, I don't think I should answer that question. And I was coming across as being really smug and really annoying. I see that now. But I thought, well, she has a point. But I was acting out the rebel. It was a
Yeah.
very poor negotiation strategy. I didn't get offered the job. I didn't even get an opportunity to discuss the job or the salary. And I know they're an employer who pay extremely well. Like, I know other people who got employed there, they got a 50% increase compared to the existing salary, which would have really
Mm.
satisfied me. But because I went in with that stupid mindset, I just shot myself in the
Yeah.
foot. So again, it's always about what outcomes for yourself do you want, as opposed to let me try to prove a point and be smug. It's a childish reaction. Understandable, and not helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so we're about 25 minutes in. I have a feeling we're going to go a little over an hour today, because we have 3 or 4 conversations to go through. But we'll try and keep it as close to an hour as possible, partly because I have somewhere to be later. I'm sure Frederick does as well, and I'm sure all of you do as well. So our first conversation, I'm always going to be the client, and Frederick will always be you. Okay, so the interpreter as adult, not as rebel child or any other of the children that we've just mentioned. I, on the other hand, get to role play critical parent as often as possible. So our
And
first,
just to point out, just to point out with this,
Mhm.
I'm going to approach this from the angle of an interpreter who has enough cash flow to be comfortable, who doesn't need the gig, who is not desperate, and who is curious to lead the conversation from adult to adult. If we're desperate, we're automatically putting ourselves in the child mode because we want to be liked, because we're dependent. We want the outcome and we want to be liked. And my goal is to not be. My goal isn't to be liked. My goal is to understand if I can actually help this the person calling me, and if so, why, and really approach this on equal footing.
And that is key. Your goal is not necessarily to be liked. Okay. Your goal is to make sure, first of all, that this client is somebody that you can help, because obviously, if they have something that they need, let's say they're calling me for a literature conference, that's so not me. Nuclear, yes. Legal, yes. Financial, yes. Literature, get thee behind me, Satan. And I will
Mhm.
always pass that on to somebody else. And so if I know that I can't help them, that moves the conversation in a completely different area than one where, yes, I would like this to happen. So do keep in mind that you should always negotiate and always have these conversations as if you are earning enough money, as if you are comfortable. Okay.
Exactly.
So our
For
first
me,
one.
it's just quickly, part of the mindset is
Mhm.
I'm willing to eliminate, provided it's for a good reason. I'm not the right person.
Yes.
It's not the right thing. It's not the right gig. I'm fine to eliminate. If I walk in wanting to win the contract no matter what, then I'm losing credibility. I'm not serious.
Okay. All right. So and I have to say that we haven't actually role played these yet. So this is live, people. It's a live broadcast, and I have no idea what any of us is going to say for anything. Quite frankly, we've just talked about the categories. So the first conversation is "You're too expensive." So I will call the potential interpreter person and say, "Hello, we have a conference coming up, or a meeting coming up, a conference, we'll call it that, which is, I see from my information in front of me, is something that you specialize in. I'd like to know if you're free. The dates are, in a month, whatever, and how much your rates are."
Well, absolutely. Thank you for reaching out. It's the first time that we get to talk. Before we jump into too much into this, so indeed this is my specialty. But I just have a question, if you don't mind me asking. Is sometimes when people ask about the rates up front, sometimes they're making a price-based decision, which might be the case, and I wonder if that's the case for you.
Okay, now we're going to bifurcate. This is where I'm going to go one way, and then we're going to come back and go the other way afterwards. So first of all, well, actually, yes, I'm calling for 3 bids to see how much 3 different people cost. And I will pass those bids on to my boss, who will then most probably take the cheapest one of the 3.
Oh, I see. So it's not a very important conference then, I guess.
Well, it must be if we're hiring you, because otherwise we wouldn't bother. We would just go all English, or we'd use, Max from the secretary pool, who spent several years in this country and says that they speak very well. But my boss tells me that we need actual people who actually interpret. So it must be more important than that.
So do you mind me asking who specifically is going to come to this conference? It sounds like you've got the no, I mean, purely English option. Turns out you've got the Max option, or you've got the upgrade, which is someone a bit better than Max. But it seems like that, I'd just like to understand a bit of the background. Who else will be attending?
Well, let's see. My boss, obviously, and people at my boss's level will be coming, and they will be discussing the future prospects for the overall company in the international market. And my boss's counterparts come from several different countries. So what we're looking for, but they're all Francophone countries, since I know you speak French. They're all Francophone
Mhm.
countries. And so we just need to have an interpreter who is able to do the interpreting for French and English.
Okay, but I guess their English is excellent. I mean, they're fully comfortable
It's
speaking in
good
English, right?
enough. It's good enough. I mean, we're not hiring you to come to the dinner. We can
Okay.
talk to them at dinner.
So they're perfectly
So we
comfortable
could have
negotiating because sometimes with these conferences, people go in pretty much having agreed on everything beforehand, and sometimes there's some topics that are pretty important, that are relatively detailed, and it's important for people to express themselves in their native tongue. But I'm curious about this because you say that you could go with Max at the office, but you want to get someone better, but at the same time it's price based. I'm a bit confused about that.
well, we need to have the 3 bids. It's part of our country's excuse me, our company's procurement policy is that we must have 3 bids. And so
Mhm.
I'm calling you for a bid.
Okay. And when you're doing this, could you remind me how long is the conference going to be?
It's going to be a couple of days.
Okay. And so how you
And
need
you
a
are
team of
available, I'm assuming,
I'm
because
available for those days. So you're
okay,
hiring 2
because
interpreters
otherwise
out of
we
the
wouldn't.
3?
I'm sorry?
You're hiring 2 interpreters out of the 3, or how's that going to work?
2 interpreters out of the 3? I don't think I understand you.
Okay, because you've got the conference going for a few days, you're talking to 3 interpreters. Are you planning on using a single interpreter working on their own for the days, or are you planning on using a team of interpreters?
I haven't been told. So I'm
Okay.
assuming that if we get your bids, we'll be able to come back to you with some information, with more detailed information, which we're not prepared to give out quite yet.
Okay,
And I
that's
might not
fine.
actually know
Um,
yet, but that's in the back of my head.
Absolutely. I know it can be super tricky when you have to reach out and talk to service providers, and somebody else is asking for it. No, the reason why I'm asking, is simply it sounds like this isn't something you've done often before, hiring interpreters for this level meeting?
No, this is the first time that our company has reached out to the Francophone branches of the company.
Okay.
So to make sure that we have a global strategy.
Oh,
We've now realized that we can do this. Before we didn't. First of all, we were too small in the Francophone countries. The operations were very small, and so we just sent them information. But now we've built up; they're bigger, and so now we're looking at talking to each other on a more equal footing.
okay. Wow, they must be thrilled about this.
I'm hoping so.
Yeah, especially on equal footing. It's something I've noticed, and this might come in helpful. Something I've noticed when people organize the conference for the first time is conferences are the whole universe is incredibly confusing. Some could even call it a confusopoly, because there's a lot of technical aspects. The organization really isn't easy. It sounds like you've been asked to manage all of this, and it's not self evident to do it the first time. So, uh, s- talking with with companies such as yours when they do it for the first time, they've often found it rather helpful to just have a quick session or quick call, so I can run them through a few of the basics for organizing it, just to avoid that there are no blind spots that come across. I mean, maybe you're completely comfortable that you don't have any blind spots because you've done it before.
I haven't. I am somewhat new to this office, but all I've been asked to do is to get 3 bids, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So this is going on a bit long for me. Is there a
Absolutely.
chance that you would give a bid, or do I not put you down as somebody giving a bid?
No, absolutely. It's just trying to understand the background. I'm very happy to. My base day rate, like for most people, is 1,000 per day. Um, and at the same time, it'd be important to make sure that I'm not misleading you, because it sounds like you're you might be trying to go with one interpreter. So there are a few pointers I'd have to give you to make sure, to help you be successful for this conference. If you're just going with one interpreter, obviously I wouldn't be able to do it alone, but I'm happy to explain the reasoning why. And I'd advise that well, there are a few points to check, and I'd advise that I'm happy to help you check those points simply to make sure it's a successful conference. And of course, that would be independently of you hiring me or not. But just to help you part of the process, I'm happy to run you through that. But sounds like there might be a conversation I should be having with your boss, and that might be easier. So,
Okay, well, I have your bid down, and I've taken notes on what you had to say. So I will pass that on to my boss along with the other two bids, and see what he has to say, and I will let you know.
okay, just like to point out, as a matter of fact, thinking about this, so just to be clear on a few things. If you're making a price-based decision, purely price-based decision, I'm not certain I'd be able to help you with this. It could be that it's simply not a priority, which would be fine. But that would be a conversation. Oh, you can pass it on. You could offer to have a 5-minute chat with your boss. I'd be happy to do, just to clarify any misunderstandings. Um, does that sound unreasonable?
Well, I've got your contact details and I've written that down. So I will pass that on along with your fee or along with your rate to my boss, along with the other two and what they have to say. And just stepping out of role for a second, we know that the other two interpreters would have said, oh, I'm probably, my day rate is, and just given that and probably hung up. So this is actually, I'm back into Julia mode now. This is actually a really good approach that Frederick had, because when there's more detail, if there is any doubt whatsoever in somebody's mind, they're going to want to hear more about that detail. And so this means that Frederick's bid, though higher, has probably captured somebody's interest a little bit. I can almost guarantee you that the client will call Frederick and say, can you come down? Can you bring your price down? I can almost guarantee it, because Frederick will have intrigued by having a decent price, and most probably higher than the other two interpreters. And he would have also given a bit of information, which I'm going to want to hear a little bit more about. But of course, I'm going to want to test the waters and play that game. So my first question would be, could you do it for less? Because the other two people have given me significantly lower bids. Okay, so let's go back to the bifurcation point ages ago.
And
I know you're
ju-
available. Yeah.
just before
Yes.
that, 2 points.
Okay.
Things I could have said, and of course it's difficult to. This is where the prep is really important. One question would have been something like, "I'm guessing you're comfortable enough going with the lowest bid." And then if the person says yes, it's like, "How come?" And I want to get the person to basically say, "Well, we don't see any difference between interpreters, so we might as well get the cheapest one." And then I'd go into something
Mhm.
like, "And that perfectly understandable. And if you saw a difference, I'm guessing that wouldn't change anything." And then they'd probably say, "Well, it would." Then I ask, "Well, how would you see a difference?" "We don't know." Then we can have a conversation so they can help you see a difference. Number one. And number two would be, if I told you I'm not the cheapest, does that mean you hang up? And if they say no, then again I ask, "How come you don't say no?"
And then I'd say I need 3 bids.
Yeah, and then how will you compare the 3 bids? So, but it's always difficult, in this
Right.
case, because it's a middle person, not the decision maker. Anyway, that was a
Okay.
quick thing. I'm mindful of
Okay,
the
so to
mindful
go
of the time.
back to the
Go ahead.
bifurcation point, and I see we've already got a question, but I'd like to hold that off for a little bit. Back to the bifurcation point, and Frederick's question was, is this a purely price-based decision? And this time I'm going to say, no, it's not.
Okay. Do you mind me asking, when people say no, it's not, sometimes they're 100% clear with how they will be comparing different offers, and sometimes they're not entirely sure. I wonder what is the case for you?
Well, we've worked with interpreters in the past, and we have seen that sometimes price is an indicator of quality, and sometimes it is not. Sometimes it is not. Um, So we would be looking at CVs or resumes, depending on which country you're in, and we would be looking at experience and possibly some other criteria which might come up as we talk.
Okay. And do you mind me asking? I'm guessing you've worked with French English interpreters before in the past.
Yes.
So if you're calling me today, is that because they are not available for this, or they're not specialists on this topic, or you didn't have a 10 out of 10 experience with them?
We had a pretty good experience with them, but unfortunately, the rules are that I still have to have 3 bids, and,
Okay.
and so I still have to call other people even if we had a decent experience with them. That doesn't necessarily mean that I will absolutely go with them again next time, however, if I find
Oh,
somebody who's going to give me more value for my money.
okay. So more value could either mean you just want someone who can do the same thing who's cheaper, but it could also mean that if you could get better, then you wouldn't be close to paying to going with a person who can give you better.
No, no, we definitely wouldn't be close to going with somebody who could give me better.
Hmm.
I don't know what that would translate to into, when we're talking about payment, but,
Sure.
you
So
know,
some, one the two routes. One is simply to try, to try to be competitive with a bid. But I find that usually it makes a lot of sense to spend a bit of time with a prospective client to understand what worked well, to understand what better looks like, and then based on that, we can see if there's a match. Does that sound like a waste of time to you?
only if it doesn't take too long. It won't be a
No,
waste of time. If it takes a long
it would.
time, then yeah, it would be a bit. I am a
No,
bit busy.
it usually understandably, usually takes about 15 to 30 minutes, and the whole goal is to make the whole selection process significantly easier, so you have a better understanding. Because I can give you a bit, but I'd like to understand a bit more about the conference, what worked out the other times, what better looks like. Because if I can't give better than the others, there's no point even bidding. And I'd rather make sure I'm not bogging you down with extra work. So if we can do 15 to 30 minutes, then in principle we have a pretty good idea to see if it makes sense. Does that sound unreasonable?
15 minutes sounds reasonable, and I have to say, though, however, if I'm investing 15 minutes in listening to this, then I'm still going to need a bid because I still need 3 bids, and you will have taken up a lot of my time.
Yes,
So does that
absolutely.
sound reasonable to you?
That
Okay.
sounds very
The other
reasonable.
thing, stepping out of my role as client for just a second again, speaking as Julia, I should hold my hand up every time I'm stepping out of my role as the client. But I'm also thinking, I might learn something for free from this guy that I could then use to talk to other people about as well. So do keep that in mind, that this is something that they are also angling for, and you don't want to give a lot of detail so that they could then go off and hire somebody using your information and you get nothing out of it. Okay, hand comes down. I am no longer speaking as me, unless you wanted to step out for a second and say something about that, Frederick.
It's just about this. It's the juggling between delaying to not give a price immediately, and that's the end of the conversation. I want more information. I want to understand where people are at. I want to understand if it's simply we're just going for the cheapest person, then I'm not going to waste my time giving a bid. It takes time to email and so on. If there's if it seems more important, then I'd like to understand how important it is, like to understand a bit more about the budget. And if they worked with people before, I'd like to understand what better looks like. So I can sell more on the, it sounds like I'm more premium because it sounds like I can do better than the others. But then
Mhm.
it's a fine line between, and you could probably sense it talking with Julia. It's a fine line between delaying a bit and being annoying because I'm not answering the question. So this is
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
juggling.
In this particular scenario, I would have definitely answered immediately that I was available and then moved on into the pricing conversation, because that removes one of the 2 questions off their list. Because if I'm not available, why would they bother even talking to me?
Yes, that's true. So something else
Right.
actually about this. It could be the thing of going, I'm available. I'm going to tell you straight up front, straight up. I'm not the cheapest interpreter out there. Does that mean we hang up? And then
No,
again,
no,
if
I
you say
still
no,
need
it
my 3
doesn't.
I still need my 3 bids, so that's okay.
Okay.
But will I invest a lot of my own time into this other than when I'm just expecting to call you and have you give me a bid? Would I bother investing all of my time in that? So you have to be engaging enough to keep the conversation going.
Mhm. And it has to come
So,
across as natural. And I just see the question from Roxanne, just to answer this quickly.
yeah.
Yes, there's a reason why I say this. It's because no
Wait,
protects and yes is a commitment.
let's just read the
Okay.
question out first to make sure. So this might be a bit random question, but here goes. I would personally tend to ask, does this sound reasonable? But Frederick, you tend to go with the, does this sound unreasonable route? Is there a psychological reason why? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yes is a commitment and no protects. So it's easier to say, no, it doesn't sound unreasonable than yes, it sounds reasonable. And that's the
Okay.
reason why it's a lot of reverse psychology. If I ask Roxanne, would you be open to hiring me to coach you? If I ask Roxanne, would you be closed to hiring me to coach you? You'd probably say, no, I wouldn't be closed. Then I can ask, how come? And then you'll explain to me. So does it sound unreasonable? It's easy to say, no, it doesn't sound unreasonable. Fine. Then we move forward. It's a no-brainer. If I'm asking you to commit, does it sound reasonable? You have to put in some effort, and you're probably not going to like it. It's going to feel like I'm trying to strong arm you a bit, and that's never nice.
hmm Okay. All right. Let's move on to our second conversation because we've got, it's only not a
Yep.
huge amount of time left before 5. And this one is one that has been coming up a lot as well. Okay. So, client speaking again, we've agreed on the fact that Frederick and I will be working together, that he will be the interpreter with a possible team that he's putting together, whatever. We're not so interested in that conversation right now. Now, the question is, and we will get to the other question. Actually, let's know before we get to we will record your interpreting. Um, why don't we just answer Vladimir's question first, which is there a difference in how you should negotiate with the client if the client agency reaches out to you or if you reach out to a potential client? Let's get that one out of the way and then we'll move on to the next one.
Sure. So slightly adapting this, if it's the two. The thing is, if it's the end client, they care a lot about the quality. Well, they should be caring a lot about the quality of the interpreting. If something goes wrong, basically, who gets fired? If anything goes wrong, we need to bear this in mind. When there's an agency, they will be looking to make short-term profit, but they probably also want to nurture the long-term relationship with the client. So we compare the dichotomy there. Going, well, you're an agency, so I guess you're just hiring the cheapest interpreters. You know, no, we don't. Really? So how does that work? Get them to explain that. If they are an agency who just hires the cheapest, I don't want to be associated with them. I want to be, position myself as being premium because I want to enjoy the work I do, and I want to make sure I'm not getting paid 20 euros an hour to prepare for conferences that are really complicated and get paid a fraction of the total budget because I want my work to be appreciated. So that's why I do the filtering. With the agencies, there are probably some agencies out there that value quality, and if there aren't, then there's a big gap in the market for
Yes,
that.
there are.
Uh, and then it's some probably making them, asking if the end client cares much about the quality. They'll probably say yes, but they want cheap. So you can get cheap, but then
Mhm,
it's not as good, or you get better, but then it's not as cheap. And then sometimes it's going, so, I'm guessing that you simply just hire the cheapest interpreters. So you get, 20 of them, give you the price, and you hire the cheapest ones. And if they say no, you ask how they do it. And most of the time, people can't answer that. So if they can't answer it, it just means you take the cheapest one. So if that's the case, there's no point. There's no point bidding. And then also it's
mhm.
going, so I guess you've never had any complaints from clients. If they have, then you want to highlight that there's a risk they get it more again in the future. But if they don't want to get complaints anymore, then you can talk because you're helping them position themselves as being more premium. So that's sort of where you'd make a slight difference.
Mhm. Also, Vladimir, just to go on with this question, just so you know, there is a technical term for this, and that's incoming versus outgoing marketing. Okay, and I've taken classes on both incoming and outgoing from the same person. I think Frederick's taken them from. Yes, and it was interesting because the process itself ends up in the same place, but it starts differently. So if you're calling to make a sales call that is somebody that you are making the call to, that's your outgoing marketing, right? And so there you will have done a lot of research on the person, the company, the possibility of why they might need interpreters and so on. If it's an agency, that's an obvious thing, though the possibility of why they would need an interpreter of your caliber, of your experience and so on. You would have done a lot of that. And then you would have a sales conversation that would start out differently than when they call you, because they already know who you are. They already know that you do the languages they need. They know they might even know that you specialize in the thing that you do. So that beginning of the conversation will always be very different. But once you get to the point where you're both on the same page, you both know that there's an event that you're available for, that it's up your alley and so on, that's where the conversations are the same. Okay, the things that we've just been going through would not change at all. It's just the opening that changes.
Yep.
And to follow up on that, Lisa says, usually potential clients email me rather than call me. Would you keep the conversation on email or would you call them? And if you choose to call, would you set up an appointment to get the time to prepare or call them directly?
Yeah, I'd call as much as possible and always view it how you're doing them a favor. And you could say that, sometimes, you got a few questions. So you could write long emails, can take them a long time. But usually people find that a quick call is a better use of their time and saves them time. And you can ask like,
Mhm.
does it sound unreasonable? Or would it be crazy? Would it be a waste of time to have a quick call just to run through these questions? Something along those lines. So get them on the phone so you can establish a bit of rapport with them. You can get more information. You can ask questions, do a bit of small talk, and just do the thing of going. So I don't want to waste your time by just sending a quote for something. I need to understand a bit more about the conference because I don't know if I'm the right fit. I don't understand what this conference is. Conferences can sound absolutely amazing, and then you go there, you realize it's just a bunch of interns doing a thing. And other times you realize it's actually senior diplomats and, like Julia said before, senior directors in a multinational company that want to talk about strategy. The thing I could have done there, say, so I guess there's not much at stake, or the budget, like the overall turnover of the company isn't huge. If it's, millions, tens of hundreds of millions of dollars, you got to get that right, and getting, and
Mhm.
then I could have also dug into, so I guess the French speaking market isn't very big for the company. If it isn't, then you can get the cheap interpreter. But if it's important, then I can start contrasting the French market as 50 million and you're choosing the cheapest interpreter. Like, how's that supposed to work? You
Mhm.
get the idea?
Mhm. Mhm. So thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to the recording issue. And so let's do that. Let's see. We're going to be recording. Okay, so we have gotten to the point where Frederick has said yes to the availability. We've agreed that he and or his team will, that means nothing for this particular conversation, will be interpreting for us. And now, and one of the questions um, that I'm assuming Frederick will ask me is, are you planning on recording the meeting
Hmm.
for any reason?
Okay.
And I'll say, of course. So
Okay.
you've just asked the question, and I'll say, of course, we are planning on recording the meeting.
Okay. So that's the okay. Of course, planning on a recording meeting. Okay. In which case, we'll be adding the what's it called, the record copyright fees, recording fees on top of that.
Recording fees? I haven't run into
Oh.
that before.
Oh, really? Okay. Shall I run you through the logic behind the recording fees? Would that be helpful?
Well, I'd like to hear about, yeah, why you're having them. Yeah, because I haven't had anybody else have them yet.
Oh, okay. Well, it's standard practice, actually. It's simply because we lose. What is it? I wrote it down, something like that. Yeah, when the conference is being recorded, we've got some other rights that disappear, so it's standard to actually offset this. But it sounds like you're a little bit surprised. Would this be a deal breaker for you?
Well, it depends. I mean, okay. Um, for Frederick's knowledge as well as anybody else's, if this is an internal recording, as in minutes of the meeting, then we usually don't charge. We might
Okay.
charge, but we don't. Whereas if it's something that's going to be broadcast or used later, like they're going to record your meeting and then they're going to play it several times for different audiences, then you definitely have to have a recording fee, just so you know. Okay, so back to the class. This is the one thing that Frederick isn't necessarily as well versed in. So, well, yes, and what we were planning on doing is recording the meeting and then playing it for other groups of people that it would be relevant for, this particular discussion that's going to be going on during this meeting, for people who are outside our company who would definitely find this very useful. So yeah, we'll be playing it and we'll be using your interpreting recording as well, not just the meeting itself, because not everybody listening to us will speak the two languages.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So typically, what we do in these cases is there's an extra fee on top of the base fee that we discussed. You're probably going to find this outrageously expensive. I can already sense you cringing, but the typical fee is 100%. It's basically double the fee in order to be able to record this and use it in these circumstances.
100%. So you're basically charging me $2,000 per day therefore, because we're recording.
Yeah,
But
that's pretty much it. Because the logic simply, if I explained the logic to you, would it change something? Because I got the feeling that 2,000 is a complete deal breaker, and you're going to hang up the phone and probably swear as soon as you hang up the phone.
well, I thought I had our interpreter, but I'm not sure if we do now, if it's going to be actually twice as much. So, yeah, you might want to explain this to me, because sincerely, nobody else has asked for this before, and
Mhm.
I don't know why.
Okay. No, I'm happy to run through the logic. But first of all, let's imagine if you do see the logic and it does make sense to you and it seems reasonable, would we be able to work together? Would the budget be completely stuck?
Well, I was okay with 1,000. I'm not sure I'm okay with 2,000. So I can't guarantee that at 2,000 that we would still be able to work together.
Okay.
But I'm willing to hear the logic and
Okay.
see if
So
that affects anything.
okay. So if the logic makes sense, you're not closed, but there's no guarantee on your end. That
There
sounds
you go.
perfectly fair. Okay,
Okay,
absolutely fair.
good to know.
So the logic in essence is that, whatever rights disappear, you get to use the recording multiple times. The alternative would simply be that everyone comes to the same meeting. I mean, that's an easy solution. Would that be impossible to do? That way you save
That
1,000
would
per
be
interpreter?
That would be very okay. Before we get to the answer of that, I'm holding up my hand. I'm being Julia for a second. Um, the logic, to go into a little bit more detail, than Frederick would be party to, because he hasn't had to do this in a while, is that, first of all, according to the Berne Convention, that's Bern is in Switzerland, we have copyright on our voices. We also have copyright on our rendition. My rendition of something would be different from Frederick's rendition of something, would be different from Lisa's or Vladimir's renditions of something. And so my version is copywritten by me. And so what I'm getting paid for is the use of both my voice and or my rendition of the ideas. My copyright is not on the ideas themselves. Okay, do keep that in mind. So this is a copyright fee. And the reason that Frederick was saying that we would lose other rights is that you should always charge a recording fee, even if it's only one, like $1, £1, €1, because if you don't, there are rights that you could be giving up that you have no idea about in your contract. So you should always charge something. My standard is 100%. I have come down to 50%, and I do know that there are people who run the gamut between like 1 and 100%. So that is up to you, but you absolutely should be charging it. Okay, hand down, back to client. Okay, so you were saying.
Mhm. I'm I'm not sure exactly how I was wording it. So it was something like, so what I try to do here, hand up, is to get a pre-agreement of, if what I say makes sense, then are you close to moving forward? So then the debate becomes, is it making sense? But if the person says we're not moving forward, not spending one penny more, then it's a very different conversation. So I want to sort of get
Mhm.
the pre buy-in to this. Something one could do to sort of disarm the other person is to say, I just want to get this clear. So your interpreting budget is X, and your budget for recording is zero. Just
Well,
want to
yes, they're
understand this.
the technicians belong to our company, they're getting paid their salary, and so the recording is just being done as a matter of course.
Okay. And, and then we get into the thing about you getting the rendition, you're getting this, you're getting all of that, which if you got it separately. But then I'd like to get back to the debate of, we
Mhm,
got a few
mhm.
options here. One option is everyone shows up on the same day. I'm absolutely fine with that. And that way you save money. The other one is that we record and then you get the flexibility. I'd like to understand, why is it important for you to have the flexibility?
Because it would cost too much to have everybody come in on the same day, because not everybody can show up on the same day, and because we may end up taking bits and pieces from this particular meeting and using them in other videos for other things, in which case we would be extracting bits, if you see what I mean, to
Yeah.
put them together in with other bits that we've gotten from other places where they didn't charge us the recording fee. Hmm.
Okay. So that sounds like it'd be actually quite valuable to have this option.
Well, it
Oh,
would
you'd be sorry.
certainly.
Oh, actually,
Mhm.
different wording. So it seems like you're saying it cost you a lot of money to get everyone in on the same day. It can't be that much money.
Well, some of the people just can't make it on that day because they have prior business commitments. And so we're running this meeting 2 or 3 times, but only having to actually hold the meeting once, and we're just going to run the recording so that people can hear what we had to say several times.
Okay, so with this meeting, the 4 interpreters, so it's 4,000 a day lasting 3 days, that's 12,000. So if you had to run it 3 or 4 times, we'd be looking at a total budget of about 48,000. But here we're looking at 12,000 over 1 day. Um, just want to understand the math from your point of view.
Mhm, mhm. Wow, okay, that does sound like a better deal, but on the other hand, we don't have 12,000. We didn't budget for that for this meeting because nobody else has ever charged recording, and I still don't understand why they're not and you are.
It'd be difficult for me to speculate on the business practices of others. Um, but let's imagine I told you it would be difficult for me to significantly reduce the recording fees. Of course, then it depends on volume and so on. Would that mean that we just stop the conversation?
I might have to go back to the other organizers and talk to them about this because it's something that we have not run into before, and so I don't
Mhm.
know if we would keep the conversation going.
Okay.
I
In this
can't
case,
tell you.
hand up. I'd have asked before questions about how come you didn't work with the other organizers this time, because maybe they're not available, maybe there's something else. But if there's something where there's a dissatisfaction, then I'd be using this as leverage to keep the conversation going.
Mhm, mhm. Um, okay, that's true,
Yeah.
and
And another thing here is to say, you know, I certainly see things from your point of view that you've budgeted things, and I understand it's, as we know, interpreting is really confusing and it's really difficult talking to different providers. And sometimes
yeah,
the offers are all over the place and prices are different and the stuff that's included is different and
mhm,
so on and so forth. Um, as you asked me to organize a team to do this, like, I explained, I work with top
mhm,
notch interpreters I'm absolutely comfortable with. Between you and me, I understand going back to your boss and asking for a different budget wouldn't be always comfortable. And here it's difficult because I'm talking with a person in the middle as opposed to the decision maker. And at the same time, I'm not sure how I justify it to my interpreters to ask them to forfeit the copyright fees without compensation, because the way we
Mhm.
work is typically we get compensated for this.
Okay.
I'm keen to
It-
find a solution, and I'm not sure how I'm supposed to do that.
Okay. Well, I have a feeling that I will have to give you a call back as soon after I've consulted with people, not my boss, but the other people who are helping me organize this, because we based our budget on past experience and not on the experience that you're now handing me. And so I need to find out if we actually have this money or if we don't, because it would be very unfair of me to hire you and then tell you, sorry, we don't have the extra money after you've already done it. So,
Absolutely.
okay.
And
I
again,
think that
hand up for this
have we
one.
gotten as far? I was going to say, have we gotten
Yeah,
as far as we can go with this one? Good.
I
So
think so.
hand up. Go ahead.
Hand up for this. Yeah, with this one, I'd have tried to establish beforehand how many participants are coming. What
Mhm,
experience have they had before? Why is it important to do this in the future? And I'm going to try to compare, for example, the um, the cost of having people coming, the value that's at stake with the fees. Because if they say,
mhm,
for example, we're having 200 people coming, 200 people seeing it, then just computing 200 people over 3 days, that's 600 days of work. 600 days of work is probably worth X hundred to the company. So they're investing all this, saying you're investing in the conference, but you're also investing in the salaries. If I can balloon a big number of 60 to 80,000 of how much they're actually
mhm,
investing, what the real cost is, then all of a sudden discussing a 4,000, 6,000, 12,000 increase isn't as big as if we're saying
mhm,
it's 12,000 on top of 12,000. If it's 12,000 compared to, 80,000, well, it's not that big a difference. And then it
mhm,
makes it feel harder for them to start debating this.
mhm. It's true. So we have one question which I can answer from Heather. I really get and apply the copyright issue. Good job, Heather. What about streaming? Often a means to reach a broader and larger audience, although obviously vulnerable to somebody recording it without your knowledge. This is one of the reasons why you don't want to give up your copyrights at all, because if somebody does record you without your knowledge and you find out about it, you then have a leg to stand on to sue them. Granted, I understand we're interpreters, we're not going to sue necessarily, but we might write a letter, and we might write a letter on lawyers' headed paper, in which case it might actually work. So, and I do know at least one person who went after the fact to a certain number of television companies that recorded a certain speech that that person only found out about after the fact and said, you have not paid me my copyright. You need to do that because you've been broadcasting my voice and my interpretation, and basically got paid from 4 separate television companies for having used their voice. So, brava. On streaming, um, do keep in mind that there's a difference between private market clients and international organization clients. International organization clients will not record you, they will stream you, and it is included in your fee. So you don't have anything that you can say about your fees then. However, you can have a disclaimer that is required to be shown on the website where you're being streamed, and or you should also include it in your contract that they should show it somewhere, which basically says the interpreter is here to facilitate communication and does not bear any legal liability or responsibility for what has been said or what they say. Just in case, you make a mistake and somebody bases themselves on it, loses lots of money, loses lots of face, and then they sue you or they sue the organization or whatever.
They get
I will put
cancelled.
a and yes, and they get canceled. I'll put a disclaimer in the comments below, a standard disclaimer. It's one that one of the international organizations that I work with uses, and I've had it translated into a few languages. So I'll put that into the comments below as well, so that you can use that at any time. Okay, we've gone to the end of that one. We might have maybe 20 minutes tops, and we've still got 2 conversations to go. Here's the first one. How much do you charge for 1 hour alone? So I've just called Frederick, and it's going to be an online meeting. It's only going to last an hour, maybe even 50 minutes tops. I need, Frederick already knows this, and so I need to know what and he's available and so on. So I need to know what you charge for 1 hour, and we need you to work alone.
So, if you don't mind me asking, quite often people ask me this question. They're basically doing the math of the day rate divided by 8. I assume that's what you're doing?
Well, no, I'm just asking you your hourly rate because I need to compare you to other people's hourly rate. I have no idea how they get to their hourly rate, quite frankly. I don't care. I'm just looking at the
Okay.
prices that they're charging me. So,
Okay, understood. So there are a few
okay.
ways to do this. I'll run you through the different ways to do it, and then I'll tell you the way that I use. One way to do it is for people to take the daily rate, divide by 8, and that gives them 1 hour. Typically, on top of that, they will be adding the preparation time. They will be adding also a buffer time before and after the meeting to make sure they stay available. And that I mean that's the standard way of doing it. And other ways is simply to say it's 1 hour, which includes all of the preparation time and so on, the buffer time before and afterwards. And if the meeting runs over. Now, I just want to be clear when you say 1 hour, first of all, is it so it's 1 hour, one person working alone, correct?
Of course, because it's only an hour, you should be able to do that. You're an experienced interpreter.
I hear that quite often. As a matter of fact, interpreters typically work in teams of two, even if it's for 1 hour. They're more likely to do this simply for concentration reasons. After 30 minutes, concentration tends to dip quite a bit. So a lot of clients prefer to hire two interpreters, even if it's for 1 hour. However, for confidentiality reasons, some clients find it a bit difficult to hire two. I'm not sure which
Mhm.
category you're in.
Well, we've never hired more than one for this particular meeting, so I don't see why we have to start hiring more than one now.
Okay. Just, then I'd ask for information about what type of meeting, how important it is.
Mhm.
And in terms of the meeting, is it a meeting that requires, like, what I just, well, here I'd ask questions to understand the preparation time it needs. Are there
Okay.
any documents for me to prepare or topics that I can prepare with?
Um, well, you say that you're an expert in the field that I'm having the meeting in, so I'm assuming you don't need to prepare at all. You should already know the terminology.
Well, that's
Private
it's a
banking.
common.
It's all about private banking in French.
It's a common misconception, actually. It's a common misconception because some people are surprised to hear this, but the preparation isn't simply about the terminology. It's often also researching the tone of voice of the person who's talking so that we can reflect the way they think. Like we know, even in the same topic, most people don't think exactly in the same way. And so they find that it's quite important to be able to relay the tone and the personality of the speaker. But I'm not sure if this would be important for this conference.
Well, it's private bankers. I'm assuming not because they tend to talk money and money doesn't have a tone as far as I know. Maybe you can
Uh,
tell me differently.
as a matter of fact, the private bankers typically the edge they have over others is their personality and the way they approach things and the values and mindset they have. So when it's this topic, I tend to research extensively for a few hours. I'll be reading LinkedIn posts. I'll be reading whatever they share. I'll be understanding more about their specific bank, the personality of the bank, the branding of the bank. It easily takes pretty much half a day to even one full day of preparation for this if we want to relay properly. As I understand, as I understand, it's a meeting with a client, and you're talking about, the client potentially would be opening accounts worth. You're talking a minimum of 40 million, but hopefully about 100 million.
Somewhere in there, for confidentiality reasons, not going into it.
Absolutely. So it's really important to maximize the probability that we get things right, even though it seems like it's only 1 hour of a client meeting. In this case, you're probably going to be shocked, but to be honest, I wouldn't be comfortable doing this for less than one day of preparation. So typically, I'd be charging 1.5 days rate for this. So that would be a
For 1
minimum
hour.
of for 1 hour, because it's important for me to do this, to have 1 day to prepare. And this is so hand
Now,
up, Fred
if
saying
I
this.
were if I
I
were
would not.
hiring you but if I were hiring you for a full
Mhm.
day, you would only charge me 1 day. You wouldn't charge me 1.5 days.
If you were hiring me for a full day, and we're talking about a client raising, bringing between 40 and 100 million, I would have to charge you for 2 full days, because I would not be comfortable doing that with only 1 day of preparation.
Hmm.
There's
Okay.
so much at stake. There's so much at stake. I need to be as prepared as possible. We can't afford. I need to understand the person's background, where they studied, the references, how they made the money, know their history, know the culture, know the anecdotes. This is the level of this. I'm not comfortable doing it for just 1 day of rate. There's too much at stake. I
Okay.
I want to
And hands
maximize the probability that you're getting the client.
Okay. And hands up now. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. And I think that Frederick is also talking about a 1 hour meeting in person, in which case you'd probably be doing consecutive interpreting. So in that case, you do need to realize that you can work alone if you're doing consecutive interpreting. It's not the best idea, but you can work alone for a day. If you do work alone for a day, it is usually charged 1.5 times the rate of what you would charge for simultaneous when you're working in pairs. Or if you're working in pairs and consecutive, you charge the same as you would for simultaneous. So if you're working in pairs, it would be 1,000, according to our example here, 1,000 per person for the day. And if you're doing consecutive alone, it would be 1,500, just so that you understand what we're basing ourselves on. A lot of the time, and we have somebody here going, prepare for a week, Fred. I think Heather's on our side. Now, do keep in mind that with COVID, with RSI, remote simultaneous interpreting, we get a lot of requests for 1 hour meetings. And I also won't work alone for a 1 hour meeting, even online, because as Frederick said beforehand, there's the dead time beforehand, the time that you're connecting to make sure that things work. There's time afterwards to make sure that the meeting doesn't go over. But what happens if during that 1 hour, which, okay, let's face it, you are capable of doing as long as it's the only job for the day, for example, in which case you should charge the full day. But let's pretend that your fee is the appropriate fee and so on. I would still not work with fewer than 2, because what happens if the internet goes out in one place and not in another?
Yep.
So how important is this meeting to you? Do you mind that it will be shut down if my internet, for no fault of my own, has been shut down and I can no
Here,
longer get into your meeting? So,
here with this, I do something like saying, I'm not comfortable doing this. I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable running the risk that if, for whatever reason, through no fault of my own, I get disconnected and you don't have interpreting. I'm not comfortable. If this is important for you, I'm not comfortable not having the safety net. It's too much stress, too much risk. I can have all the backups I want. I'm not comfortable. So
yeah,
if if it's a requirement, I'm not the right person for you. Uh, I wouldn't recommend you take this risk, but if you're okay with it, who am I to say anything? But I'm not comfortable promising a service if I'm not certain that we have
yeah,
at least this safety net. With the example we took before, there was going into private banking. That's where I was just thinking I would not be comfortable offering that service with too little preparations. There's too much at stake. If it was something less important, just whatever meeting, then I'd be doing the
yeah.
thing instead of going like, 1.5 days, 2 days, be more like probably, I can do a half day rate. A half day rate includes the preparation. Actually, it should be more than half day rate. Preparation from the previous day, being online
Mhm,
before, being ready before. And like, where did I see it? It was, yeah, Handan saying about
Handan.
the acronyms. Exactly.
Mhm.
You need to clear the mind. And then afterwards, you can't take another gig immediately. So a 1 hour gig, in essence, is a 3 hour gig plus all of the preparation.
Right.
And then also, like
Right.
Antje was saying, that's part of the fee. It's not just the time in the booth; it's also the preparation time, which is why I said you take the day rate and divide it by 2 because it's all the prep time, basically.
Hmm.
And that's
Exactly.
that's where
Exactly.
doing the math
And in
is so
fact,
important.
well, yes, and when and hands still up, but when I'm asked to charge an hourly fee either online or anywhere else, I always charge my preparation time, my travel time. I always use that as part of my arguments, and then explain how the day rate is, the project rate is
Mhm.
so much better. But
Yeah.
anyway, okay, last one, because really we still have our outro to go. Um, we did that one already. Hang on, I have one more. Okay, so this is a very quick one. Um, we're having a meeting. We have lots of people coming. We just need one. We just need one interpreter, and you don't really need any equipment or anything. You could just do that thing where you talk after people or whatever. And if it gets too long, you can just tell everybody what's going on. So we only need you, and we don't need any equipment.
How am I supposed to do that?
Well, that's your get out, isn't it? I mean, we're offering you the job. If you can't do it, if you're not experienced enough to do it, then obviously we've called the wrong person.
Well, I'm not sure how anyone is supposed to do that, to work without equipment. Well, what's the worst that could happen if they work without equipment? I mean, I assume you've done this before, right? Working without equipment?
Mm, mm.
And
And
how did that
people,
go?
it takes a bit longer.
A bit longer. And,
Mm.
I'm guessing everyone was fine with that. No, there was no one being grumpy or getting
They
impatient.
all they all understood that that was how it was going to work, and this is the kind of interpreting they're used to. Just one person and all
Ooh,
day, and just on their own, and no
that
equipment.
doesn't sound very good. Usually when people say they understood, it sounded like they were not happy, but they didn't complain too much.
We had no complaints.
Oh, that's a bad sign.
Having no
In
complaints
mo
is a bad sign.
Oh, it's terrible sign. It's terrible sign. It means generally when there are no complaints, it means that the conference goes on and nobody bothers to complain. In the best conferences, there's always someone complaining about something because it makes them look smart, and it means they feel really comfortable and they're very happy with the interpreting. Some complaints is the
Mhm.
best sign. They usually complain about trivial things. When there are no complaints, it means that it's they either they didn't listen or they tuned out or they zoned out or they don't think that there's any point complaining.
Hmm. Or maybe it went
But
fine for them and they weren't
yeah,
expecting anything else.
maybe. So it sounds like they got pretty low expectations of this conference.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I don't know. They have the normal expectations of this conference that they've always attended under these circumstances. I'm liking this one very much. Hang on. I'm liking this one very much.
Mhm. I do something here. I do something along the lines of, so just let me get this straight. Normally, when you have these conferences, you've got an interpreter working alone without equipment, and I understood that you had delegates, so senior delegates from the various organizations from around the world coming for this.
Okay, we can keep that conversation going the way it has been going in the past. So hand up. We have
Mhm.
6 minutes before I'm closing us down.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So
so I
in
think
this
we've
case,
gone. I think we've gone as far as we can go with that.
in this case, my point being something, if someone says this, they're pretty much disqualifying themselves as a potential client, because this would be I've known organizations like that where they're doing everything on the cheap. It's not important. They're not serious. The delegates don't know or they don't care, and they don't see the difference in quality. So in that case, I try to get off the phone as quickly as possible. However, I try to make them give me a good reason, such as it's not a priority. They don't see the difference between high quality and low quality, or we don't care, or I don't care, or the thing of, I'm guessing if the conference goes exceptionally well, there's nothing in it for you. You know,
Mhm,
again, a no
mhm.
warranted question. If the person goes, no, I want it to go exceptionally well, then Well, how would you expect it to go exceptionally well when you don't have equipment? Or if I told you that having equipment and 2 interpreters won't make it twice as good or make it multiple times as good, then I guess you tell me you don't care about that.
Mm,
So I try to corner the person into them, getting them say, "I don't care about better. Even if it's better, there's no money, nobody complains, or the people coming are not a priority." It's going to be tough for them to say they're not a priority. So that's what I try
yeah,
to do it.
yeah. Okay, we have one question which is a bit outside any of our conversations, which is from Jesse. How do you charge daily travel day or daily allowance? How do we explain to clients who think they're already generous offering to pay the hotel and airfare? If
So
you have any ideas, otherwise I'll do it. So,
Well,
so
the thing, if they think it's very generous, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is that we charge extra for it's either we charge extra or they expect us to pay it out of our fees. In which case we just do everything remotely. So that doesn't make much sense. And when it comes to the travel day or daily allowance, we could say, you can use the thing of going, and of course we invoice the fees for the travel or daily allowance and so on. Or we could just be saying with a daily allowance, um, some organizations prefer to give me a specific per diem that I can spend as I wish, and others prefer to get the invoices of the restaurants. Which one do you prefer? So you
mhm.
offer two options and
Yes,
ask what they prefer out of them.
yes, because actually, talking about the per diem side, we aren't necessarily entitled to some lavish per diem necessarily. The fact that we get a lump sum per diem is aimed at making it easier for the people hiring us. If they want to make it harder on themselves, then you can offer to they will ask you to pay actuals, and that's fine. You just save every one of your receipts, because whatever it is that you're spending it on, maybe you laddered your pantyhose and you need a new pair of pantyhose. I mean, that's what the per diem is there for, the lump sum. If you don't get the lump sum, then that receipt goes onto your bill. For travel days, you're not able to work for anybody else that day. And um, so therefore, they're paying for your time. Now, that can be anywhere between 100% of your time, of your fee, so 1,000 for that travel day, or down to about 50% since you're not actually working that day, in which case 500 for that travel day. Always start at 1,000, come down to 500. You might actually get the 1,000. I used to get that regularly. So,
We can work as to say
yeah,
typically it's this much, and then we can discuss the entire project fee afterwards. So if you're getting
right.
more days, then you might be able to shave off a little bit off the travel days. But then it's also saying, well, you know, we got a few options. Either you cover part of the travel day, and then I can travel early enough, or I do a full day of work and then I travel afterwards. And then we run the risk of
Mhm,
arriving extremely late, not having a proper night's sleep, and so on. And I'm not comfortable doing that because I want to make sure I'm in full energy. You're paying for someone in full energy, who's fully focused and well rested, and isn't arriving at a midnight flight that then gets delayed and shows up with, 5 hours of sleep through no fault of their own
mhm.
because they had to maximize the revenue on the previous day. So depends what you prefer, but I'm not comfortable going the cheap route.
Yeah. Exactly. And this is just a comment on our previous conversation, getting the client to say that it's not such a priority for them rather than the interpreter showing themselves to be a diva or a demanding rebel child or something. Okay, so now we're closing out now, okay? Because I do apologize, but I am actually giving a presentation in half an hour, and so I need my downtime to get out of this mode and into that mode as well. So before we get to today's top tip, I just want to let you know that our next LinkedIn Live will be in November. It'll be on the 18th because unfortunately, all the weekends beforehand are busy. And it will be a 30-minute LinkedIn Live because it's just me, no guests this time. And I'll be talking about the client journey and how you get them from here to there. Along with that, I'd just like to let you know about some opportunities for continuing professional development. As you know, I'm giving a presentation in half an hour. That one is for members of the ATA. If you are a member of the ATA and haven't yet signed up, then it's free for you. And just go to the ATA website, and it's the webinars section, the Back to Business Basics. I'll be talking about client relations. If you are going to be in Prague on November 4th, I'm giving a one-day Know Your Worth seminar. And I'll put the details to all of these down in the bottom in the comments below. And also under the International Association of Conference Interpreters Training and Professional Development section, I will be giving a smart consecutive course timed for US time and late Europe time. So starting at 4 p.m., the same time this started, CET, so here. A smart consecutive interpreting course, and that'll be in December, and I'll put the details for that below. I'll make sure to send you all the disclaimer as well, or a link to where I have the disclaimers. And I think that's it for now. So let's get to Frederick's top tip for today and for the end of today's show.
So very
Frederick?
important. Yeah, practice until it is comfortable. One thing is to understand the logic. That's absolutely key. If you don't understand the logic, you feel like you're being disingenuous, and that can be when someone says, it's $1,000. That's a lot of money. You have to understand the math, understand the logic, understand why. No, it's not a lot of money when you actually break it down and understand what you're comparing it to. And so one thing is understanding it, and then you have to practice saying it, practice these sentences, practice the reverse psychology, practice using the negatives. Does it sound unreasonable? Until these flow off the tongue. Why is this important? It's because in psychology, and using the psychometrics model I use, Lumina learning, you can look that up, and for which I give portraits. There's three archetypes, three personas. One is the underlying, how we are deep down inside. The other one is the everyday, how we show up every day. And the last one is overextended, when we're stressed. If you haven't practiced it, you won't be comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, you come across the wrong way. Like someone who is logical, if they're not comfortable arguing the logic, they will come across as being argumentative. And if they actually are comfortable, then it's a conversation. Someone who is not used to being tough will come across as being conflict seeking. Time and time again, the cliches I hear about interpreters being prima donnas and difficult and stubborn and so on, to me, it just sounds like people who aren't comfortable standing up for themselves, and you go over the top. And if you are comfortable, it's a conversation. Just as a dentist would have a conversation to understand. There's no trying to prove you wrong. There's no fighting. So the more you practice this, the more it's easier to stay composed and to avoid derailing. So practice and practice until you're really comfortable, and it just seems like a perfectly logical conversation. In the same way, if I asked you to help me clean my flat for $20, you'd probably go, how am I supposed to do that? I've got better things to do. I'll give you $20 so you can pay someone else to do it, but I'm not going to do that. There's no point. So when you understand this logic, it just becomes like absurd to say yes, or the proposition is absurd, or a few of the things we said, I tried to turn it into a way where it sounded absurd. And like a few you've noticed, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable doing this is very powerful. I'm not comfortable signing up for a conference that is going to be a train wreck, because I can tell that you don't know how to organize it and you don't have the information. I don't want to be part of your train wreck. You can pay me the money. I don't care. I'm actually I'm sabotaging your conference by letting you do something incredibly stupid. I can't do that. I'm happy to give you the information to help you save the conference, but I don't want to be part of the train wreck. So why would I do it? When we're comfortable saying this, it rolls off the tongue so much more easily, and we come across in a much more natural way. It's more pleasant for you and for the other people, and it helps you regain control and stay, remember, in adult to adult, and not fall into child trying to please a parent and say whatever it is they want to hear to be loved. It's very important.
Excellent. So, very nice. Yes, I'm glad that this was one of the takeaways. Prima donnas lack these interpersonal skills. It basically means, Fred, you and I are not prima donnas, which is great. And
Hopefully
if you included reading time, because in the $20 an hour for cleaning your flat, I might take it because I know you've got some really interesting books there. I would sit there and read them instead of cleaning them. Um, okay, so thank you all very much for coming. Remember, if you'd like to rewatch this, you can come back to the LinkedIn event and find it here on LinkedIn. You can watch it on the Know Your Worth YouTube channel. I'll post the playlist of all of the YouTube channel Ask Me Anything playlists below in the comments, as well as separately the one to July's LinkedIn Live with Frederick. So you get a bit of an introduction, a bigger introduction to today's. And thank you so much for coming today, for taking so much active part in today's conversation. It was a lot of fun. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. And we'll see you then. I will see you again in November on the 18th for the client journey.
And just one